He just underscored it, still just for one day. After that, no dictator to be found. If his name is Donald Trump. Did he win last night?
Look, it's always tough to tell how much these things resonate in real time, although I've talked to a number of Republican strategists in Iowa who said people are probably more focused on that Haley-DeSantis debate. There was a little bit more drama there. They know about Donald Trump. They don't know as much about DeSantis and Haley. And by the way, Iowa's snowed in right now, so really all anybody has to do is sit around and watch these things. Iowa voters are very engaged. They're late deciders, and they're starting to pay attention here. But, you know, we're going to hear this from Donald Trump throughout the year, right, where he tiptoes up to the line, he crosses the line, then he pulls it back. And so today he's not a dictator. We'll see what he says tomorrow and maybe into next week.
Well, he was on Fox. CNN was the venue for Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. Laura, I heard the word liar more times, I think, than I can probably count for one evening. It was 2 hours. They beat each other up for the first, then they started to criticize Donald Trump for the second. Will any of it matter, though, with so little time?
It's looking like right now they are in a solid race for second place. Neither of them really able to overtake the lead that Trump has. Right now, the name of the game for both of them is to just beat expectations. Ron DeSantis has the most at stake right now. He has basically bet the farm on Iowa. He has all his campaign there, all his money there. And when you look at the later states, you go on to New Hampshire and South Carolina, he doesn't have an operation there. He's not polling particularly well. So he has to prove both to voters in Iowa as well as, you know, in the voters that are going to be coming down the line that he can have some momentum and potentially come in close second. Nikki Haley, she just needs to do well enough because she's going into more friendly territory going forward.
Well, let's hear from Nikki Haley herself, because, of course, it wasn't just last night that she was speaking. She's still actively campaigning in the final days to Iowa. And here's some of what she had to say today.
We have a country to save. But in order to do that, we've got to acknowledge some hard truths. Republicans have lost the last 7 out of 8 popular votes for president. That's nothing to be proud of. We should want to win the majority of Americans. But the only way we're going to do that is if we elect a new generational leader that leaves the negativity and the baggage behind and focuses on the future and the solutions going forward.
And Gregory, this idea of leaving the past in the past is also something you're hearing from Ron DeSantis, that this election shouldn't be about January 6, 2021. It should be about November 2024. It seems, though, that that's really kind of the extent of where they're willing to go when it comes to go after the former president.
Yeah, we saw this last night in that debate where they spent most of their time going after each other and very little talking about the guy who's 30 points ahead of either one of them. This is the delicate dance that all of these candidates who are not Trump have to do, not to alienate Trump's key base of supporters who they're going to need for however they get to a shooting range of Trump. It's a very delicate dance. And so the best way they've figured out to talk about Trump is to talk about, you know, the chaos of the past, moving to the future. That's about as much as they'll criticize the former president.
This is, of course, coming the same day that Chris Christie dropped out of the race. We were looking at images of him making that announcement around this time yesterday. So there are questions about how much momentum Nikki Haley might be able to get from those New Hampshire voters. But when we look at Iowa, it's a different dynamic, of course, Laura. And I was struck to hear him last evening, to hear Nikki Haley, I should say, last evening, say that Donald Trump lost the election and Joe Biden won it. Will that keep her from peeling off Trump voters?
That's certainly going to be an issue that she's going to have to contend with. Of, you know, does she want to go further? She said on the campaign trail, she's been asked, you know, hey, by voters, we want you to criticize Trump more. And she says, look, I'm just not going to go there. And that is almost surely a line that has been workshopped of how do you know, bring people along, but also not alienate some people you're going to need. You know, with Chris Christie, for example, dropping out, his timing, it should be very helpful to her. In Iowa, he hasn't really campaigned. That's not going to be a huge game changer on Monday night. But looking forward, you know, 10 days from now, in New Hampshire, where he has, you know, significant support, significant being 10%. So adjust your expectations.
Yeah.
Well, and as we talk about the acknowledgement that Joe Biden won the 2020 election, that's not just something that candidates have struggled to answer, but perhaps members of Congress as well, as there are many members of Congress who did not certify those results, still struggle with that question today. And the Speaker of the House, you might be able to include in that group, but he's faced some challenges of his own. Laura, do we or do we not have a top-line deal intact as we face down the risk of a government shutdown if we don't sort out appropriations in the next several days?
As of right now, it's very unclear if there's a deal. Speaker Mike Johnson is going to have to decide whether he's going to hold that deal that his predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, made with Democrats, or if he's going to break that and basically do what his conservative right flank wants to do. This is going to be kind of the first big test for him to see if he can, try to manage this delicate dance. Of course, he could go the way of Kevin McCarthy. It just takes one person to oust him. Republicans don't really want to do that again, but basically no one's happy, and Congress isn't necessarily rational when it comes to some of these things.
Okay, so if you're following along on your home game, the government will start shutting down a week from tomorrow if this is not handled in that amount of time. And so it's become a question of whether the Speaker of the House will in fact endorse the idea of a stopgap solution. But, Gregory, that would be right in the middle of Iowa and New Hampshire voting. How can that all happen at the same time with the noise coming from the early states? And we know the Speaker's in touch with Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look, this is the problem with the House Republican Party, where they have just the narrowest of governing majorities and unable to lose even a handful of votes without then having to resort to getting Democratic votes for anything. As soon as they do that, then, as Laura pointed out, you can have just one member of the Republican conference come to the floor and move to vacate the chair. So this is the tenuous position that Kevin McCarthy found himself in. Now Mike Johnson, and who knows, maybe a third speaker if things do not go well here.